So yeah, we'll watch this. We'll discuss it afterwards. Some people said they missed the first bit of it. So just to quickly answer a question I kept getting, A&L Labs is where you get your soil test. A&L Labs. You can Google that, hit the residential link, and then it'll tell you where you can get a soil test kit to send it away. All right? So let's watch someone else talk.
Hi everyone. Jen asked me to share some things that we're doing and learning in our garden, and we're starting here with the wood chip garden. So I wanted to walk through some things that might be helpful to you and how it's been a benefit to us. What's the first one?
So, how do you build it in the first place?
How do you build it? So we built this over top of grass, and it's very important that you start with a layer of cardboard, or you can also use paper if it's at least like 6 layers thick. When you're laying it down, you want to make sure you really get good coverage so you're not having gaps where the grass can grow up through. The next layer, ideally, is mushroom compost. A decent layer of mushroom compost. And then you're going to want to get like 6 inches of wood chips down, ideally, which is a lot. It can be hard to fill a space like that, but that's what's going to really work to prevent your weeds and get the whole process going. The next question?
So then how do you plant in 6 inches of wood chips?
Right, so, not a big deal. I mean, especially season 1, if you're planting into it right away after you put it down, you're generally going to want to go with like shallow rooting things like lettuce or, because you have the cardboard and it's not broken down and all that. But we did it the spring before we planted, the fall before we planted. So basically you're just gonna move the wood chips to the side, like I would generally do it in a row if I'm planting my peppers. And so you just get down to the dirt level, and you just dig your little hole and put the plant in there, and then just, gently put the wood chips back around.
So would you so you wouldn't dig a hole through the cardboard?
No.
No, you try not to. Okay.
Yeah, so you would generally, if you're wanting to put it down and plant right away, you're going to have enough mushroom compost to sustain whatever you're planting.
Okay.
Keep it shallow.
All right. So how has this been a benefit to you?
Okay, I love the wood chip garden. First of all, it retains moisture. So even last summer when we went through the dry spout, I had watermelon in here, which I think generally need a lot of water. I watered once or twice, and they did amazing. So you don't need to water. You also don't need to weed. And if you do get some, which, okay, it does happen, they should be fairly easy to pull out. Those are the major benefits, I would say. Oh, and also as the wood chips break down, they regenerate the soil.
Okay, so then as they break down, are you adding more wood chips, or how do you go about that?
Yeah, you definitely, need to add more chips as the years goes on. You want to maintain that nice layer of about 6 inches.
Do you ever have to add more cardboard on top of it and do the whole process again? Or?
No, if you've done a good job the first time, which if you see the plastic over there, it's because last summer we didn't do a super job of making sure, our cardboard, there was no gaps. So we did had some weeds come up, and I think we just didn't get it down thick enough. But no, if you've done a good job and you've got your cardboard covering everything and you've got a nice thick layer of wood chips, you shouldn't have to ever do that again.
So then where would you get the wood chips from?
Yes, so, you can call around tree companies, and if you get lucky and they're driving by, they will sometimes dump them for a pretty good price. There seems to be more demand now, so the price is going up. Last summer I did pay like over $100 for a truckload,
Okay.
but I got another truckload for $20. So
it varies.
you just gotta call, and you can get lucky. You can call Hydro and they'll give them for free, but I haven't had any luck with that. There is actually also a website which operates in Canada. I will get that to you, where you can say,
Okay.
I'm interested in wood chips, and then people looking to dump them can see.
Okay.
I've never had any luck with that, but
Fair. So, but getting just random wood chips, how does that
Yeah,
work
so
out for you?
generally, you don't have to worry too much. Wood chips are good, whichever kind. You definitely don't want black walnut, so that's the one thing to be aware of. It can, really ruin your garden. Whether or not you get like pine, I don't know. Some people say it's fine, and some people say it might make it a little acidic, but generally, most wood chips would be fine, except for the black walnut.
Cool. And then, so when you add more wood chips, are you digging it all in so that they're all together, or what are you
Okay,
doing?
yeah, good question. Very important. You never ever mix your wood chips into your soil. When the wood chips get mixed in and as they're breaking down, they'll denitrify your soil. You have to maintain the layers. So, as I did, I just carefully moved the wood chips back, plant into my soil, gently cover in again. You do not want to mix your wood chips into your soil.
Okay, good to know. Any other comments on what you think of it? Like, there's a bare spot behind you.
Yeah, so if you don't get the good coverage of a good 6 inches and you have kind of a sprinkling of wood chips, it's not going to help you. And you're going to probably be disappointed or feel it doesn't work. Overall, I absolutely adore this method because it's so easy. It's so good for the plants. As I say, I had watermelons, peppers, what else did we have in here? Melons, like cantaloupes, and everything did amazing with very little work. So the biggest work is getting it established, and then it's very easy.
Sweet. Now, is there anything you wouldn't plant in the wood chips, like
Right,
root
so
vegetables, or is there stuff that you would?
it's a little harder to do something like carrots. So we did actually leave a section of our garden of bare soil. Now, I think you could use other types of mulches, like a compost as a mulch, and there's people who do that. So it's a little harder to do something like carrots. Maybe not ideal for the wood chips.
Fair enough. Awesome. Let's move on.
Okay, great. So here we have a little bit of a larger scale, and our goal was to be able to grow crops in this field without being overcome by weeds and to do it organically. So we had some help to understand how we can get to the point of having a natural cover on the field that will allow us to plant into it and have weed suppression, help with holding onto the moisture, and of course it also helps with preventing erosion over the winter time. So what is it? This is winter rye, it's also called cereal rye, and I did have someone help me get to this point. We actually planted buckwheat first last summer, and then in the fall we plant the winter rye. So winter rye, you do need to plant it in the fall, but it can be pretty cold. I think it's down to about 5 degrees, it'll still sprout, and you'll want it to grow just a wee bit in the fall. And then all winter the roots are growing, even though the grass on top is not growing. And then in the spring, when the weather warms, this will just shoot right up, and it should get pretty tall. And at a certain point, when the plant is ready and there's a small window, you crimp it down. And you can, on a larger scale like this, get or rent an attachment called a roller crimper. And so at the point when the plant is ready and you crimp it down, it's going to die, and that's very important that it dies. And then you will have a nice mulch that you can plant into. There is a roller crimper, distributor here in Elmer, which is a big plus because I think you can rent it from him.
So, why did you go with the winter rye?
Yeah, so, and I should say the winter rye can be used both on this big scale, but it can also be used in like a much smaller scale garden,
right.
Because of all the benefits that it provides.
Because there's lots of different cover crops. So.
Yes, and I think they all have different purposes, but for the purpose of getting a mulch down,
okay,
I think winter rye is your best choice.
All right, so there's how do you plant in it after you've crimped it?
Yeah. So it's, I haven't done it yet, but I'm imagining it's going to be very similar to planting into the wood chips. Once it's crimped, it's going to die. So you're just going to have a mat on here, and you're going to, you know, spread it apart and plant in. Now you can do this on a bigger scale. Commercial farmers do this on a bigger scale, and they literally crimp it down with the tool on the front and plant with the tool on the back, and it just spreads the rye apart.
Okay.
And plants. Generally, you need to do things that have bigger seeds. So people do soy and corn and things like that. We will do it manually.
So you're gonna, you said you're doing corn in here then, or?
I'm going to do a lot of tomatoes in here.
Okay.
So again, it'll be crimped on mat, and we'll manually plant them in.
Yep.
I do want to try corn.
Okay.
I'll have one plot on here, and I'm going to do another plot that's not in here.
So the specifics,
Right, so the, you know, again, all the benefits are weed suppression, moisture, erosion prevention, but especially on a larger scale, you have to crimp it down at a very specific window of the plant, which is probably going to be, depending on how the weather goes, early to mid-June. So that also dictates what kind of crops that can go in here. That's why I will do corn somewhere else, because I really want to get that in sooner.
Right.
But things like broccoli, cauliflower, butternut squash is very popular to do, or winter squashes, types of squashes, very popular to do in winter rye, because they can go in a little bit later, and also because it keeps them off the soil. That's a benefit.
and so you said you can do this easily on a smaller scale. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah, I have
acres.
seen people do it on a much smaller scale. You know, plant your winter rye in your garden in the fall, and I understand you can mow it down. Is as another way of killing it or getting it ready to plant into, but I don't know the details of when you do that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so this is another mulch that we use. This is hay. When you're using hay, it must be organic. There's something that they use on non-organic hay that can really harm your plants. We used hay last season both for our asparagus and also for our potatoes. Next question.
Oh, hay versus straw.
Hay versus straw. I'm not as familiar with straw, and so I don't know if you could use non-organic straw and be fine.
Right.
But for sure, when it's hay, it must be organic.
So then, how did you apply the hay onto the garden bed?
Right, so it's like all the other mulches, it just needs to be good and thick. So when you get a patch like this where you can start to see the dirt underneath, not going to work for you. You're going to have weeds. So, but this patch here, really good and thick. So we bought large bales of hay, and then we literally just rolled them out along the plot, and then took, you know, big chunks and just toss them down. So you just need to have lots of good coverage. Really good for asparagus because they don't tolerate weed competition. We, in some spots, just didn't get it thick enough, so we did have some weeding to do, but overall, way better than if you didn't have it. And we found it was less expensive than wood chips and a lot faster to apply. We were in a rush to get this laid down last spring, and we actually changed from wood chips over to hay because it was faster and a little bit less expensive.
So then this season, to reapply hay, you'll just put it right on over top?
That's right. I mean, there might be spots that are still good and deep, but if there's spots that are not, we got to get those covered, or we're just going to be battling the weeds.
How did it work for the potatoes?
Yeah, it also worked well for the potatoes. We had a great season. You know, potatoes don't like to be too dry nor too wet, and so I think, you know, a mulch like this is really useful. We did water a couple of times in the driest parts of, I think it was July last year. So the benefits, you know, it keeps them a little bit cooler, and the moisture and all these things. With the potatoes, you know, you have to hill them, right? And so you can't go in and use your tool to hill up the soil. So we hilled using the hay, and that was fine. But it, you know, we didn't get quite enough coverage sometimes on the top, so I did get some green potatoes on top. But I mean, overall, we still had a bumper crop, and they were very happy. The potatoes were very happy. So I think one of the points is, are there risks of using hay? I don't know for sure. It may be that we got some blight from our hay on the potatoes last year. We did have blight, and I know there's not been potatoes in this field for a long time, so maybe it came from our hay. Overall, it didn't affect anything. We still had a great crop, but that's, I suppose, a potential risk is that you bring something along. At the same time, when you have a mulch on like this, you're not going to have your soil splashing up onto your plants and leaves. So I think that can also minimize, disease on the leaves.
Yeah, then you're not getting the moisture on the leaves the same way. Would you use this over the chips, like other than time saving?
I like the chips better, but yes, it was faster and it's a little bit cheaper.
And then any other benefits?
Oh, well, so another benefit of the wood chips in particular, and I can't really go into a lot of details, but I know they do help keep pests under control in two ways. Some, pests can't get up or can't get down to, lay their eggs or do what they need to do in the soil. They're blocked by the wood chips, and so that limits them. And also the moisture factor, keeping the plant really nice and consistently moist. When a pest goes to bite into it, they literally are drowned. So it's a pest control by keeping the plant healthy and robust.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think that's it.
Okay, great.
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Lindsay Copper, and Jenna asked me if I would share with you how I do my garden prep, and whatever other questions she's going to ask me. So.
And this is Pete. He might show up.
Yes, my dog.
So yeah, what did you do this year to prepare some new soil?
Okay, so our existing garden went up until the grass line here, and because we thought it would be fun, we thought we should make it bigger. We rented a sod cutter to remove the sod, just so that we wouldn't be dealing with grass and weeds, and we didn't have to spray to get rid of it.
How deep does the sod cutter usually get? Does it get the roots, most of it, or?
It gets a good chunk. You can raise it to different levels.
Okay.
So it depends how heavy you want your sod roll-ups to be.
Fair enough.
So we tried to go, I don't know, at least an inch, if not more, I would say. It was pretty heavy to roll it all up.
And then, so what do you do after you've got a clear patch of dirt?
So I will put my tiller on my lawnmower, and I will till it. I would probably till it a couple times, just till it, and hopefully the weather warms up and dries out the grass that's remaining in it, and then till it again. Probably do that a couple times till I'm ready to plant in May. But I'll also add compost and aged chicken manure to it. We are in clay soil, and it's not very nutrient dense. And so the garden over here, we've been doing for about 5 years. When we moved here, it was like I could hardly till it. It was so awful. And now it tills beautiful. There's lots of worms, and
Nice.
so I feel like we've, what's the word for that? I can't remember.
Amended?
Yes, we amended it.
Yes.
Yes. So every fall or spring, depending on just our schedules, we'll add a chicken manure from our chickens. We have egg chickens, and then we also grow our meat chickens, and so we kind of save that, add it to the garden, till it in, and then when I plant, I will also add rabbit manure to each individual hole, and that can be fresh because it doesn't burn.
Nice. And then, so you mentioned clay soil. I guess how is it managing just the topsoil as you do? Do you have a lot of problems with weeds?
So the lady that lived here before us really thought that thistles were pretty.
Oh.
And so she let them go to flower and to seed. And so that is the biggest weed that I battle. So I have the cowslip one, which is the not prickly one, and then there's a prickly one. The not prickly one, the cowslip one is the worst in terms of management. So yeah, that one's just really hard. It's probably why I haven't gone no-till yet, because unless I break it up and get rid of the tubers, it just keeps multiplying.
Fair.
And then for the rest of the weeds, I have a handheld or like a small mini rototiller. So I plant my rows far enough apart that I can rototill after I plant until things really bush out, which just is a quick way to keep the weeds at bay without doing lots of picking. And then once, in August, once everything leaves out, then it's just hand weeding.
Fair enough. Any other tips or points of interest in your gardening experiences and getting things ready?
I just think that I'm always learning. My grandfather was a gardener, but he didn't really teach us. My dad gardened and I worked alongside, but there wasn't direct teaching either. So I'm just kind of winging it, and Google's my best friend.
Fair.
So I know like some people do get their soil tested. I haven't.
Okay.
After we amended our soil over a couple years, like we've always had great produce come out of the garden. So I'm pretty sure that whatever I'm doing is working. But if it wasn't working, that would be the first thing I do.
Okay.
Would get my soil tested. Yeah.
I'm looking at the field beside us. Does he ever cause any problems to your garden, or is it pretty separate?
They come around, they do spray.
Right.
So, I mean, that would be the unfortunate part of being so close. But other than that, it's not an issue.
Not an issue.
Yeah.
Nice. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Two very different people, right? Different ways of doing stuff. Any questions right off the bat? If you have, they both said they couldn't make it today, but if you see them in church, go ahead and talk to them. Bryn is usually, she does security, so she'll stand by the corner or be in the library, so you can hunt her down there, and Lindsay just wanders around. So you can find them somewhere. If you have questions, Mike? Yeah.
Yeah, question, Jen.
Yeah.
With the wood chip garden, when you plant the seed in, did she cover it fully with 6 inches of mulch again? Because that's a lot of mulch for a seed sprout to go through. Or did she leave it uncovered till it was 6 inches high?
We've got to answer with Christy.
Sorry, I'm not running to the front. I also do the no-till. So you pull it back, plant it, and as it comes up, you slowly bring it back.
Okay, perfect.
So you can do seed, not just saplings then? You don't have garden sprouting, you can plant just seed in that style garden?
Yeah.
But you have to wait till it comes up before you cover.
So the question...
Just so everybody knows, we do record this and put it on YouTube. So if you ask or say something out here, it's not recorded because it's only done through the microphones. As best you can, use the microphones.
Or I'll just repeat you, which is why I'm repeating you. Yeah, Chris. Yep, it won't bite.
So the winter ride.
Come closer.
So the winter ride, do you let it? Is it letting it die first, or is it simply just providing the nutrients, the no weeding, or the less bugs and stuff like that?
So once you crimp it, it does die. It just dies, and then you can plant in it right away. So that's fine. Yeah, because and it over years. So she'll have to, it's an annual, so next year she'll have to replant it again. It won't come back for her. Yeah.
This isn't a question, but it's
Yeah.
just a place where you can get free wood chips in London. St. Julian Streets near Highbury and Hamilton. There's like a spot where the city lets tree companies, they just come and
Dump it.
It's luck of the draw. You don't know what type of tree it is, but I've got lots of wood chips from there.
Perfect.
Just a big pile. You go there with a bin or whatever.
So that
fill
was
it up.
Julian and Hamilton?
Yeah, Julian and Hamilton. It's at the end of Julian. There's like a park at the
Oh,
end.
yeah. Okay, so like kind
There's
of around Highbury.
Yeah, Highbury and Hamilton. It's near there.
Yeah. They do that in Woodstock too. And there's apparently a place in Woodstock. Okay. Southwest Oxford. So there's lots of places to get free wood chips if you start Googling it. I don't think Bryn actually got me that info. She did give me some resources that she's used over the year to come up with theirs? Chip drop? Okay, so Greg was just saying that what Bryn mentioned may not be the best source. Like she said, she hadn't gotten many hits on it. So, yeah, a bunch of different ways. I love Lindsay had a whole different problem. She's tackling it a whole different way with the rototilling, and because the clay, as she said, to go back to a question earlier, the worms are there now. They weren't before, and they're there now with her adding of the compost. One thing I want you guys to make sure you caught is she said aged chicken manure. Don't put fresh chicken manure on ever. Same with even horse or cow. It will likely burn. So if you've got a buddy who's giving you manure, try and let it sit for a year at least. To get it's just so potent that it will do more damage. Yeah, and to get seeds, especially with cow and horse, they eat grass, they get seeds, and then now you've got weeds in your compost. So it needs to sit, age, break down those seeds. Any other questions? Like I said, if you see them, ask them. They love talking about it, especially Bryn. All right, so we're going to go into a little bit next. So now you've got your soil done, you're ready. And so there's a few little things in soil structures. So yeah, those are included in your notes, if you made notes for Lindsay's. Soil structures. There's not a whole ton that you necessarily need. This is actually right out there last spring. So that's, I've got tomato structures I kind of invented myself. I'll talk about them. And then trellises for cucumbers and beans. So what worked and what didn't work. So my little niece watering. So the tomato structures. I went with the lean tomato structure. So basically, you take a string and there's a whole ton of string kind of wrapped up here for as the tomato grows that you can release, and you attach the tomato to the string as it gets up. So you kind of prune out I'm getting a little detailed, prune out suckers so you have one main shoot going up, and as it gets tall, you can lean it as you pluck the bottom ones. So this is the structure I kind of created, and because I was feeling zealous and wanted to fit as many as possible in, I staggered them, and that's why there's two. Considering the environment, it really didn't work too bad. They blew over once, but I mean, I got a field behind me, right? So the wind just whips off of there. They really actually held up pretty well considering what I did and didn't know. This year, I'm going to go with more of an A-frame and a whole lot more solid wood, and I'm not going to try and be quite so zealous and fit 2 rows in. I tried. I wanted more. They grew beautifully, but harvesting was a pain. So you could, but harvesting was a pain. So again, I'm going to do the same idea with the string. But these are different ideas for your tomatoes. Everyone knows the tomato cages. They're strangely expensive in the garden center, right? But you also probably know your tomatoes grow out of them really fast if you get the big varieties, and then they're just flopping over. So they're good to about halfway through the summer. They look great, and then when you're harvesting, they're just all over the place. So there are other techniques, so like that, or this is cattle fencing. It's $70 to $100 per sheet, but it's going to last you forever, and then you just trellis your tomatoes up the fence. It's great because it's not going to fall over, so you just have to figure out a way to implant it in your garden. And then there's staking, so you can have stakes, and then again, you just, as the tomato grows, the main shoot, stake it to, or attach it to your stake. So simple ways, complicated ways for the tomato. The next structure you might need is for pole beans and cucumbers. Cucumbers you can let lay on the ground as well as squash, but for space saving, they grow up, so why wouldn't you? This simple A-frame and then just chicken wire worked great for the beans. No problems. I could have even put the chicken wire higher because the beans just kept going. Cucumbers, though, the chicken wire I found was a little bit too small of a hole, so the cucumbers would go in it and kind of choke themselves out because they would grow into the chicken wire. So live and learn. But I use these pictures because you can actually see the structure because they were just covered by the end. Other ways of doing it, so many different ways. Again, because it's beans and cucumbers, they'll grow on anything. So you just Google structures and the sky's the limit. You can make it decorative and pretty. You can make it functional. Or whatever you do, just make sure it's strong enough, especially when you start getting into rope and whatnot. I've been buying like the jute you get at the jute rope. You think it's all nice and natural. It just rips apart. Even Lee Valley's rope, the like twine you get, you can snap it no problem. So which makes no sense to me. I thought it was supposed to be strong. Nope. So just make sure that whatever rope you're using to let it crawl up is strong enough, or else halfway through the season it's just going to be all on the ground. So my lessons, invest in a little bit more better material right off the bat, right? If you know, I didn't necessarily, because I didn't know if this garden was going to stay here, what the plans were, so I didn't want to go too crazy. This year I know it's going to stay a couple more years, so yeah, things are going to be a bit more solid this year, and I'm using homeschool labor. Right? They didn't do, anyway, never mind. A lot of questions about raised beds. I wanted to visit a house that had raised beds in her backyard. Didn't work out. Raised beds, tons of different options, tons of different designs. I included this one because you don't have to make it square. You can, right, the person can stand right here and reach all of it. It can be as high as you want, as low as you want. The corner, I use that one because of the corner structure that you've got, different corners for it. Just make sure that it holds together. What I wouldn't do is put a bottom. Or one question I got once was, they've got tree roots. So I wouldn't put a wooden bottom necessarily because that's just going to rot out on you, right? But a landscape fabric bottom to keep something, or cardboard, maybe not even cardboard because that would break down, but even just and then the tree roots would eventually come up through it. So landscape, they'll get tangled in. Tree roots are a pain. But at least this way now you can manage the soil. Advantages to that, you can dictate what soil goes in there. So now that we know all about soil, things I wouldn't necessarily put in would be straight, cheap bags of garden soil or topsoil. That is just a filler. So I know garden centers all the time, the cheapest stuff is topsoil. It's black, you think it's beautiful, it's going to be mush. There's nothing in it, it's just pure dirt. So you're going to want to mix it. There's triple mixes, yes, they're more expensive, or you can make your own mix. Of the triple mix would have topsoil, compost, and manure. You can make your own mix of bags of manure, compost. You could even add some peat moss in there, because then that will help aerate it, add moisture retention, because if you add just straight bags of garden soil, that's just going to get heavy, it's going to rain, and you're just gonna get a muddy, kind of solid mess. I kind of look at raised beds the same way I look at potting stuff, potting pots, flower pots. I don't want to put topsoil or garden soil in there because it's too heavy and it just doesn't let the roots get anywhere, and it's just going to hold on to that moisture. So now, mixing it, now we know that, yeah, you have to have some sort of mix. So you can add sand if you need better drainage, or sand on the bottom. This one has hay on the bottom, probably to keep the weeds from growing up, and probably also as filler to not use as much dirt. That's going to break down eventually, and so your soil's going to sink. I've got this. So if you're using these fancy, or not fancy, they've made them fancy, tubs, make sure you drill holes. Always have drainage, 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 or you're just going to have a mud bath. No matter what is underneath, you've got to let that water drain out. Even if they say there are fancy ways of doing raised beds where the drain it's self-watering, but still, even then, it has something. A common misconception at a garden center is put rocks on the bottom and you've got instant drainage. No, it's if you still overwater, it's still going to go up into the soil and you're still going to have too much water eventually, right? So you still need that drainage. Rocks on the bottom just kind of, I don't know. It's a weird myth. You still need drainage. Rocks on the bottom just make more water available, but if you still overwater, it's still going to go past the rock layer into the dirt layer, and you're still going to drown your roots. So drainage, whatever creation you come up with. Metal, it works. My initial thought is if it's too hot, it might burn, but people love it. Wood, make sure it's not going to break down in your first season, so make sure you ask the garden center what kind of wood isn't going to break down on me. Some people would love to line things with garden fabric everywhere. I don't know that if you're doing 2 layers, maybe. I don't know that you should, too much dirt will get out of there. If you're using fabric soil or garden fabric, try and get at least a decent quality. Otherwise, it'll rip before you even get the soil on top of it, right? So it'll be broken within a half a year underneath, especially if you're trying to block roots from coming up. Yeah, so again, you can get creative with how your garden works, right? So the structures don't have to be all functional. They can be nice looking. One thing I wanted Bryn to talk about, forgot to, was her garden fence. So if you have a little bit bigger area where raccoons and stuff can get in, I have a garden fence in our garden. Going back, so yeah, I put in a chicken wire fence. You want to bury that a little bit to help keep the rabbits out. Nothing's going to keep out squirrels. Squirrels will just get in everything. That was a question. What keeps out squirrels? My answer is not allowed. Or coyotes. But you know what? Actually, chicken manure. They've been selling chicken manure, aged, composted chicken manure. Somehow keeps out squirrels. They don't like the smell of it. So it keeps them from rooting around, and customers in the garden center, you can buy big or little quantities of it, sprinkle it on top, works as a natural compost, helps keep the squirrels away. It's great. Yeah, that's one way. I mean, you can see, I've seen in Lee Valleys, they've got spikes on the ground. I would also go with that, because they're squirrels. They're gonna find a way. Yeah, but then, so that is really, I tried wrapping my mind about what other garden structures you need. Those are the basic ones. Everything else just kind of you put in the ground. Label your plants. Labels, garden structures include labels, because that's something you have to add along with the plant, because halfway through the summer, is that a weed or is that a vegetable I'm trying out? I don't know. And suddenly it turns out to be a beautiful weed. So yes, labels. Plastic over wood, wood breaks down, gets wet, gets gross, gets lost. So make them bigger so that when someone's gardening, they don't like bury the label in it. Yeah, so that's just the easy, quick, and dirty of garden structures. I think that was it on that. So, a little less intense than soil structure and texture. Any questions? Yes.
What do you think of those, their fabric bags, like, the grow bags?
Oh,
or
yeah,
sometimes people, like, even like I've seen like large ones, like garden bags. Like, what do you think of those and how
Oh,
do
yeah.
you work with them?
Garden bags, so a cloth bag. Again, with that new crop, they love doing new things. So they're great, actually. They do something that they naturally air prune roots. So if you get a pot from a garden center and you pull it out and the roots are all spiraled around itself, and now your roots have to branch itself out. That's why some people say play with the roots to disturb them so they get out of their circle. With air pots or cloth bags, the roots will go there, they'll hit the air, and they'll stop growing. And so then they'll just grow inside the dirt. And so it naturally prunes the roots from growing any bigger, getting suffocating themselves. In a big, I've never seen it, I've seen it used in like pot form with one plant in it, great. It will dry out faster because it's all cloth, so you've got more air exposure, so you'll be watering it more often, but not a bad thing to use at all. I don't think so, no. But that's why they're different than a plastic pot, is they air prune the roots so you don't get the wrapping. Oh, yep.
So then what kind of soil would you put in them? Like you said, like not topsoil, right?
No,
Like
not topsoil. I would still go with a peat moss, compost, manure mix. Probably the smaller the container, the less compost and manure I'd probably put in it, or a potting mix, which usually is just peat moss and vermiculite and perlite, which both are not necessarily vermiculite, but perlite, which helps with drainage, and peat moss, which will hold the moisture. So it's just kind of a substrate, so it's not actually soil. So you could add a little bit of, like I said, depending on how big it is, add some of that just for a bit more substance than just peat moss. No. Good question. Cool, good. All right. Once again, perfectly an hour. So we can have another break and then you get to listen to Christy talk. All right. Thanks, guys.